Hello, I'm Robert, fact-checking for scared people. So in my last two videos, and I'll put the links in the video description once they're all up, then the first one I talked about how there's no way that Putin is going to order an invasion to attack Kiev. It makes absolutely no sense. In the second video, I talked about how there's no way that NATO is going to be involved in a fight. Absolutely no, makes no sense. NATO is not part, Ukraine is not part of NATO, and there's no way that NATO will do anything except supply weapons to Ukraine, and only defensive weapons. It's not going to attack Russia over this. So this last one then is about, maybe I'll do a fourth one as well, is about how any invasion of Ukraine, there's no way that it really is highly unlikely that Russia does any form of invasion of Ukraine. So I'm going to talk to three ways they could do it in a less. So the first of all is any invasion of Ukraine, however small, would push undecideds towards NATO. So just anything that goes over the line. Because as I talked about in the previous video, with the it's especially clear for Ukraine compared with Donbas, because it's the other way, sorry. No, it is this way. Especially clear for Ukraine because the Budapest Memorandum, which I talked about yesterday, and Russia agreed not to attack, along with UK and USA. So if it was to invade, then even the smallest invasion, even if it just dropped a few shells on Ukraine directly from Russia, and even if it were to capture a few hundred square meters of Ukraine, then the principle would be the thing, and it would turn many undecideds away from Russia and towards NATO, because they've so blatantly violated it. So even a small invasion, if it doesn't have any excuse or any reason for it. So they're trying to find an excuse for the separatists, but some kind of, even a start of an invasion towards Kiev or anywhere else in Ukraine where there's no possible excuse for it, then that would be pushed on the side towards NATO. So now, what I want to explain about the Russian separatists, and this is a situation where they could manufacture an excuse, and that's what all the false flag is about. So the Russian separatists, they're ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine who want to be part of the Russian Federation, and they are opposed to the westernizing tendency in the rest of Ukraine. So basically this is a slow-running civil war that's going on since 2013 between the Russians who want to be part of the Russian Federation, ethnic Russians, just some of the ethnic Russians, not all of them, and then the other ethnic Russians and Ukrainians who want to be part of the part of closer to Western alliances, not necessarily NATO, but they want to be independent and they want to choose their own way, and they don't want to be dominated by Russia. Zelensky said that it's not necessarily NATO. He doesn't want, but he said that he wants to be able to decide his own future. They want to make their own decisions as the time comes. So Russia wants Ukraine to modify its constitution to allow the separatists to have a word in whether Ukraine joins NATO, and that is basically Putin's ace in his hand. He got that a kind of concession in the Minsk protocols, and they have never implemented it, and they're not likely to implement it. That was a previous government too that worked out those protocols, and it was pretty much kind of forced. So that's Ukraine's point of view. Ukraine, and then basically, the analysis I found said that the Minsk protocol is actually two agreements kind of smashed together, and it's inconsistent. You couldn't do all of it. And one part is what Ukraine wants, and the other part is what Russia wants. And then, so they have some common things that they could agree on, and then they have other things that they can't agree on, and they just push them all into this agreement, as if they could somehow achieve them all. And that's basically what happened. And so since then it's been disputed, naturally. And so, and it all depends on the order in which they do things. Basically, there are two different agreements, they're smashed into one, and that's how they managed to get some kind of an agreement. So, anyway, if Putin was to invade the separatist area of Donbas, so that would not really be much of an invasion, because it's already Russian controlled. Russia pays the government officials there, Russia basically governs it. It's just in name part of Ukraine. But that is it's a kind of symbolic distinction, but one that is very important to both Ukraine and to Russia. So if Russia could just go in there tomorrow and just send, and it wouldn't really need much in the way of force, because it's already Russian. And they may get some kind of resistance, but there wouldn't be very much, unless they were to try and push beyond the border of the ground that they've managed to get by this is ethnic Russians. So it's a civil war of ethnic Russians fighting the Ukrainians. And of course some people with Ukrainian ancestry would have sympathy with the separatists, and not totally binary black and white like that. But it's basically it's a kind of ethnic Russians against other ethnic Russians plus Ukrainians against that, with that line. And the and then so if Russia could do that, they could have done that last year. If that was what Putin wanted, why has he waited all this time to do it? It doesn't make sense as an end objective, and it doesn't make sense because Putin would lose all this advantage from the Minsk Protocol. The Minsk Protocol would no longer apply. It would be done. He'd have lost it. He'd lost all the attempts at the concessions he got in the Minsk Protocol. They'd all be gone. There's no way it applies anymore if he were to do that. Because the Minsk Protocol is all about how to handle the Donbas region. So if Russia just goes in and takes the Donbas region, and then even tries to push beyond that, but even if it doesn't, if it just goes in with its army and adds Russian soldiers to the front line alongside the ethnic separatists, then that's the end of the Minsk Protocol. And Russia's lost all its leverage over the Ukrainian government. It can no longer claim anything from the Minsk Protocol, which is the only thing it's really got by way of leverage. So this is why I think it's extremely unlikely that Russia is really trying. So we get this whole thing about the false flag, that all this unrest in there is I think this is just as misinformation as Biden saying that Russia plans to invade Kiev. So I don't think that Russia plans to invade Donbas either. But this time it's Russia that's doing the misinformation, and it's saying that there's going to be, we might have to go in if and then it claims that the Ukraine is attacking back, which is patently false. And then, but it's not doing that in order to get an excuse to go into Donbas. That seems extremely unlikely, because Russia doesn't want to go, because Putin doesn't want to do it. So I think this is just, I don't think Russia, I think this is a whole mind games thing, that they are pretending that they are going to do a false flag, but there's no way they're going to push it all the way. They're just kind of pretending a false flag. It's a kind of a double bluff thing. That is, the false flag itself is a kind of bluff, and then a kind of double bluff, or a double entendre, what's the word? That's not that, but double. I don't know the word for it. Maybe you can think of a word for it, but it's like in a thriller, in a detective novel where you get things flipped and then things flip again. So I think he's 2 steps ahead here. And I think that's what's going on there. And then you've got this thing about military technical measures. So this, again, I looked up an expert on Russian military technical language, and he has looked at how this word is used in Putin's speeches and things. And he says that it is these are about measures that are. It seems to mean an enforced embargo to prevent Ukraine getting new weapons from NATO or Turkey or other countries. And then, if that's the idea, so this was in the written reply to the United States. Russia said, if we don't get what we want, which was ridiculous demands for NATO to withdraw from the countries it's agreed to defend, like Lithuania, like Latvia, Estonia, etc. There's no way NATO can do that. They said, if you don't do that, we may have to resort to military technical measures, and that means basically resort to measures to prevent NATO supplying arms to Ukraine. But that would be, what's the point in that? Because they already got their weapons. I talked about that before. They've got the Stingers, they've got the anti-tank missiles, they've got the Neptune drones from Turkey. They've got lots and lots of advanced weapons. If that was Putin's aim, I mean, it'd be a big anticlimax for Putin. At the end of all this, all he does is he said, well, okay, you haven't done what you haven't agreed to any of my demands, so therefore I will do these military technical measures. In other words, he then stops Ukraine from getting more weapons from NATO as best he can. I mean, that would be a big anticlimax. If he wanted to stop Ukraine getting weapons, he could have done that in start of last year, and then Ukraine, if he'd been successful, would never have got these anti-tank missiles, new anti-tank missiles, or the Stingers, or the Neptune thing. Oh dear. Bit of a sneeze. To stop Ukraine now is like closing a stable door after the horse has bolted. I did that before. So I don't think Russia is going to do anything military. I think it's just going to keep on driving tanks back and forth and sending soldiers around, and I think that's it. I think we've seen what it's going to do, but it may well keep this going. So the United States is trying to force Russia to back down, and Russia is likely to respond to that by saying we're not going to let ourselves be pressurized by the United States. So this is a motive for Russia to keep more soldiers there, because they don't want to be seen as being the weaker party. So if Russia were to do what if the United States said, you've got to withdraw your soldiers, I think that's what's going on here. Then if Russia was to climb back down, and were to withdraw because the United States said so, then it's basically Russia saying, okay, you're the bully, I'll do what you say. It's a bit like two bullies fighting each other in a playground or something. So I think basically Russia is very reluctant to do what the United States is asking it to do. And I think that's why we get these conflicting messages of withdrawing some things and putting other things back in place. I don't think it's because it's trying to invade. I think it's just because it doesn't want to be seen as the weaker party. And like I said before, it's not this quote that I've from William Else in the group is so good. Where can I find it? Always at the end. Then that is basically what's going on. Just a lot of, I'm sure you've probably seen it before, like when two stags fight, a lot of noise and fury, signifying nothing, just redefining the boundaries. A lot of testosterone, a lot of just saying, we're strong and we're not going to do what you say, and we're going to go our way. And then once they've both done that enough, and they've been clattering their antlers together enough times, then they'll kind of sort out the new boundaries and they'll settle down into a proper treaty. But meanwhile, they have these, and there is some diplomacy going on, so the thread continuing. There's much less, there's an awful lot of this war of words between the United States and Russia. There isn't such a war of words between Russia and Ukraine and Russia and France and Russia and Germany, they're talking much more. But United Kingdom, it's basically the Anglo-Saxons, as one of the videos from Russia that I just watched said. So United Kingdom and United States, they're the big ones leading this. They're the ones saying that maybe they're a bit more hot-headed or what it is. I don't know what the reason is, but it's just words. It's not actual fighting in military sense, but they are just saying very, very strong words back to Russia, and Russia is saying it back, and this is part of what is prolonging it for so long. And I think that if they were to, well, I don't know. I'm only saying this to help scared people. I'm not making political advice, but I'm just saying that this is so as to understand what's going on, whether or not it works, whether or not it achieves anything. This is what's actually going on. It's just like stags battling between United States and Russia, and between that, then Zelensky is saying, we are the ones who are affected by all this. And Zelensky has been making many videos saying to the United States, please stop. This is harming Ukraine. This is not helping us. And so Zelensky is very, very vocal about this. And he's saying he doesn't want all this war talk fighting. And he says he doesn't want all this fake invasion talk. He wants to settle down to negotiations with Russia, with France, within the Normandy format, France, Germany, Russia and Ukraine, and they want to settle down and get some kind of an agreement. And the United States would be involved, and the United States has to be involved because of the INF Treaty and things like that. But he wants there's certain things that the United States just doesn't have the subtleties. They don't have the understanding of what is involved in the Minsk protocols, in getting them sorted out. They're thousands of miles away across the Atlantic, and they don't have the direct experience and understanding that the Eastern European countries have. And that's what Zelensky is basically saying, that's what Russia is saying. That's even France and Germany, they're being very polite about it. But that's basically what's going on. So we've got a big fight between Russia and United States, and then we've got attempts at diplomacy going on all the time between NATO, and then we have some diplomacy going on between the United States and Russia, but they're very far apart, and they basically need to a certain extent, respect that Europe knows how to do the diplomacy here, and that Biden really doesn't. He doesn't really understand the main issues involved. He understands the issues about the INF Treaty and the issues about American forces in Europe and positioning of intermediate range missiles and issues to do with some of the issues to do with the forces going up and down. He doesn't have much understanding of the separatists in Ukraine and the Crimea and what all that is about. He doesn't show much appreciation of the Normandy format, or he hasn't. Macron had a very productive meeting with Putin, and Biden hasn't even referred to it. They haven't even mentioned it in any of their public communications, although it was obviously with his blessing, as it were, but he doesn't seem to have much interest or understanding of why Macron did need to do what he did. So that's basically what we've got. So we've got these two stags battling, and then we've got some others that are kind of nudging around, trying to get some kind of negotiation, and hopefully eventually that this may well continue for quite a while, because but I think eventually it's going to end, and then we'll settle down to these negotiations, and then I think once it goes down a bit, I think the United States do have the capability of doing the proper negotiation, but at the moment they're all kind of all testosteroned up, and they're just not really listening to Russia, and Russia's not really listening to the United States, and they're just going to take a while for them to feel that they've done enough noise and fury to go on to the next stage. They've got to basically exhaust this kind of fighting spirit, and then go on to the next bit of the negotiations. And meanwhile, it's a bit exhausting for the rest of us. So I've got another video about kind of tips about how to deal with all this.